Well, good evening to one and all. Thank you for being here. My name is Kelly Duncan. I'm president of the Audubon Commission, and we have several members of the Audubon Commission. It seems all weighted to my right. I don't know what's wrong with Ron and me, but apparently no one's sitting over there. But I thank you all for being here as well. This is the first of three public meetings that will be talking about this incredible riverfront project. This is a conversion of the Governor Nichols Wharf and the Esplanade Avenue Wharf into a public park space. It will create one of the largest contiguous public parks, or riverfront parks rather, in the entire country. The purpose of the meetings is to get your input. We really want your input, whether it's tonight or whether it's going on a really tremendous website that Audubon has put together that is called Riverfront For All. Riverfront For All, of course it is. So it's a great website. I have looked at it, I just don't remember the name. But it is a great website. So we very much encourage you not only to attend these meetings, but also to go on that website. It allows you to provide your comments to us, and that's very helpful. As we'll talk a little bit later, what we're here to do in these meetings, and by virtue of the information we get on the website, is to frame a vision and the priorities for this riverfront park. So it'll be based on your input, it'll be based on research, based on what's stated on the website. The ground rules are that after me, I will be introducing Mark Ripple, who will speak, but after Mark is finished, we will then have a question period, which will be 2 minutes for each person. There should be cards, I hope. Are there cards for them to sign? Good. Where you need to, if you would, put down your name, address, and telephone number. And then, as I say, there'll be 2 minutes to talk. The items to be discussed tonight are items that we're talking about tonight. Please don't go start talking about the fly. We're talking about the riverfront. We really want to keep this focused. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mark Ripple of the Eskew, Dumas & Ripple architecture firm. He will lead us in a discussion of what this project's all about and what we're trying to achieve. So thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. I first want to introduce our team. We are here as a joint venture with Eskew, Dumas, Ripple, and Manning Architects, doing this project as a joint venture. We have a number of our team members here, and I've just asked that when I mention your name, just wave. So Amanda, Tom, Nick, Ryan, and Kirk. We also have Keith Twitchell with us. Keith is with the Committee for a Better New Orleans. He is also assisting us, helping facilitate the meetings. So thanks so much to the team. That's our team. A member that is not here today is Kurt Reeder with Hargraves & Associates. They are the national landscape design firm that helped our design team design the landscape for the Crescent Park project that was completed a couple of years back. We wanted to start by highlighting the mission, what we're trying to accomplish. The mission comes directly from the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement. And important in this Cooperative Endeavor Agreement between Audubon and with the City of New Orleans. And specifically, I pulled just one section from what is, as you can imagine, a lengthy document. But it says to develop the property into a public park and recreational facility. That's the mission of the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement. The mission of us, of the design team, and you here today, is to facilitate a very robust community engagement process over the next 4 or 5 months that will help inform the design of that park that allows us to achieve that mission of the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement. We also, as planners and designers, added our own aspirational goals, and you can see the 3. Hopefully everybody can read those on the screen. But celebrating the heritage, not just of the city, but the amazing natural attributes of the river itself, and to enhance the public experience of the riverfront. Hopefully you can read this. If I'll highlight the key points, if not, it is much larger at the back of the room. It's important that you understand how this process works because we've already had a lot of questions about that. The first 5 months of the process, as you can see, 2018 into the spring of 2019, are this very robust community engagement process. And bear with me because this is important. This is meeting number 1. We are going to replicate meeting number 1 at 2 other sites because it involves so many members of the community. We are going to do precisely the same meeting. We're calling this meeting 1A. You guys are the first. Congratulations. Meeting 1B, we're going to have over at Algiers Public Library. Just simply, we want to get as many community members involved, and to have just one meeting to kick this off is perhaps unfair to the larger community. So we're going to replicate this process precisely at Algiers in about 2 or 3 weeks. And then again, that's why there are 3 dots by the number 1 there. In a couple weeks after that, at the end of October, at the fairgrounds in, I think it's the Black and Gold room, at the fairgrounds. That'll be meeting number 1, and the goal is to frame the problem and to listen, and we're going to talk about that more in a second. Meeting number 2 will be in November. Meeting number 3 will be probably in December. We're working out the details. Meeting number 4 will be sometime after the first of the year. But in addition to that, this process is much more involved than that. Again, if you can't see it, we're going to go ahead and read it. As Kelly had mentioned, Audubon has already activated a website, so everybody has the opportunity to see and hear what's going on and to provide their input if they can't make the meetings. And that's going to be continuing throughout this entire 4-month process. In addition, we've already been invited to neighborhood groups. We were invited to the VC-Poor and Faubourg-Marigny Improvement Association meetings last month. We accept any and all invitations, obviously within the limits of the 4 months, but we are open to the possibility of coming to you if you have a neighborhood organization that you'd like a point of view and you'd like us to be involved in that. In addition to that, there's a whole series of regulatory meetings. There's a whole bunch of city, state, and federal authorities that have jurisdiction, as you can imagine. We're going to be doing a lot of that. And then finally, maybe arguably some people would say most importantly, we have an ongoing traffic study because we know that one of the big issues is what about cars, what about traffic, what about parking? It's important that there's a red dash right pretty much in the middle of that schedule. And that's an important stopping point. The city has made it clear that under this cooperative endeavor agreement, that the city has the right to review and approve the design ideas that come out of these sessions. We don't know the specific format of that. That is yet to be determined. But after we finish this, there will be a stopping point where the city reviews what is done and approves us to move forward. Assuming that approval happens, then we as the design team would be authorized then to actually implement the designs that have been agreed to as part of these sessions and as agreed with the city. And then there's a whole bunch of permits that are normally in place when anything gets designed and constructed. So that's a multi-year process, and we're focusing here the kickoff on these first 4 or 5 months. As we mentioned, there's a website up. It is called Riverfront For All. Please dive in and make your comments known. We're already getting comments from citizens. Just to highlight, this process was used. We just finished a couple months back the Audubon Park Master Plan. Used the same process. We got thousands of comments online and from folks using the park, and it greatly informed the elements of the master plan. So as we said, meeting number 1, both 1A, B, and C, and the 3 locations, it's here to listen. We're going to spend about 15 more minutes for what we like to say framing the problem, understanding what it is that we've got and what's the nature of the opportunities. But the final hour of this meeting will be for you to make your ideas, your concerns, whatever you have to say. You've got 2 minutes to say it. We don't plan on trying to answer all those questions because usually have a lot of people with a lot to say. That'll be in meetings number 2 and 3 and 4. In meeting number 2, it'll be much more interactive. We're going to break into groups, do workshops, and do interactive planning with you at tables. And after we finish these meetings, we'll figure out what is the nature of that meeting number 2. Meeting number 3, we're going to begin formulating conclusions and share those with you, the community. And the meeting number 4 will be to do a formal, if you will, a draft final presentation with final comments. Let's talk about this opportunity. What is it? It's 2.25 miles of riverfront from, when we think about from the foot of Canal Street all the way down to the Ninth Ward. And how has that emerged over the last 300 years? Of course, the French planted the flag 300 years ago. We know all about that. But if you fast forward, 290 years of that was maritime use. It really wasn't until the 1970s, with the development of Moonwalk and of Spanish Plaza, that the decision was made that we're going to allow the public access to the riverfront. Later on, with Waldenberg Park and the aquarium in the 1990s, there was further riverfront access by the public. Significantly, 1.4 miles of riverfront development under Crescent Park that is open now to the general public and has been generally a large success. And what we're looking at now is the final, we think, roughly 1/3 of a mile. What does that look like? What can it be? That's what we're here to discuss and to listen to your comments. Let's shift to the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement so we can properly frame this. As we said, the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement uses specific words, and words do matter. Redevelop the property into a public park and recreational facilities. That's quote, chapter and verse from the CEA. But additionally, the Audubon Institute, per that CEA, is endeavored with operating and maintaining the park. There is an expectation by the Audubon Commission to invest a minimum of $15 million in doing so. We've already gotten a good question on the website. Where's the $15 million coming from? It's coming from a combination of Audubon, the Convention Center, excuse me, New Orleans and Company, which is the new CVB, and fourthly, assistance from the Port of New Orleans. In addition to that, there is the mandatory city review and approval as part of this process. That's written into the CEA. And then finally, this is important, it needs to be a pre-approved, what the CZO, the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, calls a permitted use. So what exactly does that mean? Let's look at the CZO and explain what that means. This wharf property, which is roughly 1/3 of a mile long, falls under two different planning districts per the CZO. The upriver piece is the Vieux Park District. The downriver piece is the Regional Open Space District. The split, the dividing line, is the extension of Esplanade. There are also a number of other districts surrounding it, most notably both the Vieux and the Marigny-Tremé districts as well, that certainly come into play. So the first one, the Vieux Park District, it's about 2/3 of the site, and it's the upriver piece adjacent to the Vieux. A limited number of permitted uses. Specifically, it says intended to provide for parks, public facilities, and associated uses. And again, if you want to read much more, we have much more in the back if you want to drill into that further. The Regional Open Space District is a bit more complex. Key phraseology from that, classification for large parks that draw visitors from the entire region. There is a whole slew of permitted uses that make up the Regional Open Space District in the CZO. Not going to read through all of them, but you can get the gist of it. You know, it focuses on, regional park includes a variety of recreational areas, but also certain ancillary commercial activities such as cultural facilities, performance venues, and restaurants. That's what the CZO says. We also have a number of authorities having jurisdiction. We're not going to go into them, but they have a lot of different overlays. When you look at this wharf sectionally, there are lots of people that can say a lot about what can and can't be done, and we're not going to go into that. But we certainly have that in detail in the back that we can share with you. Oh, sorry. So this is roughly 1/3 of a mile of metal-framed warehouses that have been traded out as part of the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement. There are 4 points of access that exist to this property. One is the floodgate and crossing at Esplanade. The second is the overhead Mandeville Crossing bridge that gets you to the Mandeville Wharf, which has been converted to open space as part of the Crescent Park project. The third access is downriver from Crescent Park, and the fourth access point is upriver along the levee from the Moonwalk. And as we look at this piece of very important property that connects these two, we can't help but note that when we talk about the opportunities for either active or passive, what exactly that means, we can see perfect examples of that upriver and downriver. Upriver is much more active when you think about the nature of Woldenberg Park, the Audubon the aquarium area, Spanish Plaza, and Jackson Square. That is decidedly different from what we see as the designers, part of the planners and designers for Crescent Park, which is much more passive. It's much more about passive relaxation as opposed to active recreation. And this, not so coincidentally, is the link that will link those two together. As we look at the riverfront history, it has never been about public access. The city is here because of its maritime, the opportunity as a strategic maritime port, and over the course of 200 years, what started with simple, easy access to a riverbank that developed into wharves and docks that ultimately then was cut off by railroads because of obviously the needs over a 200-year period with the port, and then finally with the wharves themselves. We can imagine the image on the right is not terribly good, that we couldn't find a lot of good images. Just imagine the ultimate nail in the coffin, if you will, separating the public from the riverfront would have been the Riverfront Expressway in the 1960s. Thank God that didn't happen. So what we're here to talk about is how, with this continued decanting, how we can continue to make the riverfront a public condition. And although it happened in the 70s, we think that the 1984 World's Fair was significant because it showed the general public what an amazing amenity the riverfront was if we opened it back to the people. And of course, in the 90s, with the development of Woldenberg Park, and then on into up until 3 years ago with the development of Crescent Park. And as a firm, we've continued to explore for 30 years what might be, what is possible, what does the water's edge create in the way of opportunities for public use. We're thrilled to see the way in which the park is used at Crescent Park, from the Rusty Rainbow on down, the ways in which there are different kinds of active activities that actually happen in the repurposed Mandeville shed, and it's very much what we had envisioned when this process was planned several years ago. And finally, I love this image because the design of the downriver piece was based on the idea of authenticity. What does represent the heritage of this amazing city? So as designers, we said, we're not going to scrape all of that clean. There's a wonderful story to be told so that railroad spurs become walking paths. We don't have to scrape away all of the wharves. They can be repurposed, and it's part of the story and the history and the heritage of this amazing city. So we as designers, we applaud the ideas that come from recognizing what is authentic, what is real about New Orleans, and creating real places that respond to that. And we do look at other parks, other facilities, other cities for inspiration. Cincinnati, Memphis, Louisville have all gone in different ways, have found ways to re-engage the riverfront with the public. Pittsburgh, Nashville, even New York City. The upper right is an example of one of the renderings that we did for Crescent Park. We said, okay, why can't a converted riverfront shed be an opportunity for once a month to have an art exhibit, celebrate the wonderful local artists, the talent that we have here in the city? Why can't it be a farmer's market? It's hard to see, but in the upper left. Or can it simply just be an area where our kids, our families can play? Or actively, engage, or perhaps maybe it's just a quiet place where you can sit in the shade because nobody likes sitting in the sun and just enjoy this amazing, amazing amenity that we have. So that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to understand what you do want, what you don't want, what your ideas are, and how we might as a group come together and implement those ideas. So as we said, we're here to listen. That's the overview. And I think I won a bet with Ron because he swore I could not do this in less than 20 minutes, and I think I did, but we'll see. Not finished yet, he said. So the next half is here to listen. We wanted to talk about some of the rules of engagement. We have a lot of people, and I bet every one of you has something to say. So what we want to do is limit the comments to 2 minutes. It's not here to answer the questions because, as we know, if we answer the questions, we'll get into a dialogue and it might eat up 10 minutes of the time, and there might be 20 other people that are waiting for their 2 minutes at the podium. So to be clear, we are obviously recording this. We have lots of people that are taking careful notes. We are going to be keeping the cards. We're going to be listening carefully. But for the next hour, our job is to listen and for you to speak as clearly and eloquently as we can. Just in terms of the format, we have somebody that will be here next to the mic that when it's 15 seconds before the 2 minutes is up, he'll wave at you, shake his arms, or just tackle you or whatever, but something to get your attention that your time is up. So please be respectful of everybody that wants to have a turn at the mic, and let's see if we can hold it to 2 minutes. I think, and the comment cards will continue to come in. If you haven't sent in a comment card, we've got lots of people that will be receiving them and bringing them up, so just keep the comments coming.
And I got back from a trip to New York City, and I would really like to see a lot of what happened at Brooklyn Bridge Park happen here at the park, where it focuses a lot on children's recreation and having a place where kids from the neighborhood can go downtown and see their downtown and the landscape of that next to the river, and also take pride in that and recreate and feel like they are the future of this city, and to have that city say that we are interested in your wants and your needs, and we're here to cater that. And to have more pride over their city. So I think that really putting the forefront of the children and recreation here, whether that be fountains or basketball or tennis or whatever type of sport, I think would be, in my mind, the highest value added to this park. Thanks.
Thank you, Gardner. Well said. Next up, Dan Harris. Dan?
Hi, thank you for this hearing, and I hope you do adhere to what folks have been saying for at least since 2003 in charrettes that have been continuous process. I think I haven't figured it out most recently, but there have been at least 7 or 8, including the Lambert and the UNOP and so many more. Here's 3. Have you read and will you adhere to the comments almost unanimous in Riverfront Vision 2005. I realize that's 13 years ago, but I do not see that people have veered very far away from what was, again, an almost unanimous feeling that they wanted a passive park that was linear, that had dedicated revenue streams to it, that did not depend on an amphitheater to keep it maintained. How will you be paying for this? What dedicated revenue stream do you indeed have? You did mention the 15 million. And you did mention the entities that are the ones that contribute to this 15 million. Where does that 15 million come from? Is it a dedicated bonding? Is it a state fund that you're depending on? Is this anticipatory, or is it actually in black and white? I think that does it. So again, I hope you really do respect the process. Again, we've gone through this so many times. We really, this time, want it not to be put in a drawer and really get the job done, so the residents that surround this, that will get the major impact from this, can enjoy this and not just feel that they're being bombarded. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next up, Maxwell, and I'm not going to try the last name. You know who you are.
Yeah, I'm going to actually echo a lot of the points that Gardner brought up. We've talked about this park a lot recently. I think that keeping the architectural elements of the wharf is something that's unique and important, to honor that area's history. I also think that access to the river is really important. Down at the new updated Waldenberg Park, you have, there's stairs that actually lead very close to the river. And I've been there about 4 or 5 times. Every time I've been there, there's probably, 30 people all hanging out. And I think that, there's not that many places where you can get that close to the river.
Sure.
And then I'd also just like to echo the recreation piece. I think that this park should be a park for everybody, not just people that like walking or biking. I think that it would be interesting to have, a basketball court or a tennis court or even a skate park at kind of the further end of Crescent Park. People skate there every day. Usually there's groups of like 10 people, and they're using those the little benches to skate on. And I think that if people are already there skating, they should have, a more dedicated area. Thanks.
Thank you, Maxwell. Next up, L. Suarez.
Good evening. For Crescent Park, public participation was cut off on numerous occasions during the entire process, in which the Marigny neighborhood was adamantly against any entertainment venue at the Mandeville Wharf. I am 1 block from there and resent all events in which sound invades my entire house, especially wedding singers on Friday and Saturday evenings. I strongly recommend a tiered admission system modeled on the blue bikes, where low income pay very, very little or nothing at all, especially school children, and visitors pay by the hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next up, Dashikwa Crittenden.
Hello. I would like to see an addition of edible fruit trees and shrubbery in the area. I would also like to see some rehabilitation to the waterfront for migratory birds on their path to the Gulf Coast. I would also like to see some rehabilitation of the water area for aquatic animals and plants. I would like to see some medicinal herbs that are labeled, maybe their Latin name, also their origin and their uses. Some shading, right? So along the riverfront, it gets really, really hot. The sun just beams down, and a lot of the benches are just right there in the sun. If the shading was natural, like some trellises that had like vining over the top, that'd be great. Just more incorporation of natural aspects of our world in general. If it's not paved with concrete, a lot of times that beams up more heat, and it makes the area just a little more hot. Also, as long as it's open a little past nightfall, right? So I like to spend a lot of time in the summertime outside after the sun goes down because it's cooler, and a lot of the parks shut right at dusk. And I'm not as so much of a night owl, but I do like to spend some time outside at night. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dashikwa. Next up, Jane Krug. Jane?
Hi. I'm a French Quarter resident, property owner. I actually live on the 500 block of St. Philip, so half a block from the proposed development. As most of you probably know, the lower quarter has always been the more residential part of the quarter, and I really hope you all keep that in mind when you are working on your plans. What I would like to see is something along your passive route, green space, something to provide respite, really, from the congestion and the commercialism of the rest of the quarter. Oh, and one more thing. Please, please, please plan on doing some kind of rat eradication program before you take anything down, because I don't want to see those rats flood into the quarter.
Heading to your
Yes.
neighborhood. Thank you, Jane. Okay, Michael Burnside.
Seems to be the day for meetings. The City Planning Commission just finished an hour ago. As far as the idea of the 2 wharves and the connection of the 2 properties, my main focus on the card that I submitted to you is 24/7 access. Now, I understand the perfect can be the enemy of the good, and if you can't get 24/7 and you can only get 26 or whatever, I'm not going to riot in the street. But the basic idea is that a lot of public amenities are closed with locked gates and locked doors for a lot of time. So one of the funding streams that you really should consider is some sort of payment for security so that everything is clean and neat and no problems, but you still have access for a noticeably extended period of time. because a lot of people come to the city and enjoy it in the evening and at night as much as they do in the morning and the day. Some people jog in the morning, some people want to walk in the moonlight at night, whatever. The river's a beautiful place, and it should be accessible to the poor, which means the security needs to be a cost burden on everybody, and not just private events where rich people can provide their own private security. It should really, doors open, gates open, fences open, people can come, enjoy, and be glad to be part of the city.
Thank you, Michael. Got a couple more cards coming. Nathan Chapman.
Good evening. Thanks for having us this evening. I guess what I would like to just kind of mention, make sure remains on our forefront of our thoughts. You know, the Vieux Carré in particular is a landmark designated historic district. That is as high a designation as there is. This is on the level of Monticello or Mount Vernon and, you know, et cetera. So as we plan the riverfront, and we're all looking forward to that, we just need to make extra care that we don't burden our adjacent neighborhoods, including the Marigny as well. You know, they give us so much already, right? We wouldn't even have a tourism industry if it wasn't for historic neighborhoods like the French Quarter and the Marigny. And so we want to make sure we only add to that, but there's a lot of pressure on them now, and we want to have low-level uses. We have the Mississippi River there. What an attraction, right? Let's go and enjoy the views of the Mississippi River, and a passive activity I just think will be win-win for everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. And as a point of clarification, I realized it was on the screen, but I didn't mention it when we were talking about, I was so focused on the comprehensive zoning ordinance overlay. In fact, for that, the upriver 2/3 of the wharf structure, that does actually fall, as we understand it, falls under the jurisdiction of the Vieux Carré Commission. So you wouldn't think of it as part of the historic fabric of the city, but in fact, it is. That's another overlay. As we say, lots of people have lots of jurisdiction over what is and is not possible. But thanks, Nate. Next up, is it Riera, R-E-I-R-A, David? Or Rayanna, I'm sorry, Rayanna. David, yes.
Good evening,
Good
everybody.
evening.
When I saw this story, I say I have to come in and check it out. I was personally thinking about moving out of New Orleans, but there's so much promise in this city, and I've lived here for about 40 years, and it's really hard to move out. So I have changed my mind, and I am going to stay on. And I think this is a beautiful plan that y'all have. And New Orleans is known by several names: Big Easy, Crescent City, the city that love God, I think. I think theme is very important, and the next name for New Orleans should be the City of Love. It really is the City of Love. And there's a lot of promise here. All I do is pray that nothing like Katrina happens again. And yeah, this project should be inclusive, definitely, as I've heard, and everybody should be welcome, families, adult children, pets, you know. And there's a lot of artists. I am an artist, and I would love to use that platform to share my talents. And I just enjoy what y'all doing, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Rand. Okay, Ken Karen.
I'd just like to make a few comments. Thank you for having this forum, number one. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but I have to say I'm pessimistic at this point about what you guys are doing. I'm going to go back a few years. The mayor's office of neighborhood engagement actually created a board. And it was a group of us from 7 different neighborhoods. There's about a dozen of us and some other people to give you guys recommendations on the design of Crescent Park. I'll tell you, zero of our, we spent a lot of hours, dozens and dozens of hours. We volunteered, and zero of our recommendations were even taken in, not one of them. So I feel like this is window dressing, and I want to know, is this window dressing? Is this just checking it off the list? And I have some serious concerns about that. And then the timing of the studies for like doing the traffic studies and things like that. Our city's falling apart. So, you want to create a nice front yard, but the backyard is falling apart. Our streets are falling apart. We don't have enough police. You're going to build something. We don't have the infrastructure to probably hold that right at this point and to support that. So that's a big concern. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And Ken, just to clarify, all I can do is say with the utmost sincerity, this is not window dressing. We are here to listen, and we hope that the ideas that, and maybe there were ideas from Crescent Park that might apply here, but we would very much like to understand what the community does want, what the citizens want, what the public wants, and do our best to implement that into a plan. But thanks so much for your comments. Next up, Jason Richards.
Hi. I use Crescent Park a lot, and the one thing I regret the most about it is not enough water fountains. So there are none in the French Quarter. So I would just like to ask you, make sure that these show up and don't cheap out. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, Scott Simmons? Yes.
Definitely thanks for having us here for comments and giving the public a microphone. What were you guys thinking? First off, I use the park every day. I'm a very avid walker first thing in the morning at sunrise, and I've been to sunset at Crescent City many times. Don't forget that when you leave the views. Some of the views that we have, I think a lot of people miss it. I know a lot of people in the French Quarter miss it in New Orleans, unless they're still up, which they are. Saturday and Sunday mornings are a lot different than Monday or Tuesday. But think about that when you leave the structures. I love the way you guys left that in Crescent City Park. It's very nice. But think about what you're leaving, because you're in that perfect spot in the curve in the river. And it could be very easy to leave one structure that would block out a beautiful view of downtown at sunset, or vice versa, sunrise in the morning. Right now, that's how it is with what is existing there. I definitely think the dog idea, I'd never thought about the water fountain thing until he just said that, but that's true. We have a couple around in Waldenburg and some of the other pieces of the parks, but they only work about 50% of the time, so don't cheap out. I agree with that. Definitely public access for everyone. I love the pets idea. I also live on St. Philip, 700 block. Don't want the rats either, so let's take care of those first. Thank you very much.
You had one other thing on the card that you might have forgotten about. Crossing.
The railroad crossings. That is huge. Right now, they're early in the mornings when so many people use this for exercise on that bottom strand. There's no way out. So you come in at the aquarium, you come around, and I probably answer that question 20 times a month from tourists who are jogging. How do I get out? Where can I go from here? And the only thing you can tell them is turn around and go back the other way. Most don't complain about that, but that is something to keep in mind in everything you do. Maybe some of the existing structure can be used to do that.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, I'm sure there are other comments out there, but if there aren't, I'm going to maybe stimulate a little more conversation because we've got plenty time. One of the things that we had brought up when we went to the VC Pora Faubourg Marigny, when we were invited to their meeting, I had a quick little anecdote, and I saw a lot of people in the audience nodding their head. Our firm is at the foot of Canal Street. We're at the 31st floor. We're an architecture practice with 50-something people. The biggest problem we have is where do we store the bikes? Now think about that. Staff members that bike to work and bring their bike up the elevator to the 31st floor. And I bring up that anecdote because a lot of them live in Marigny and Bywater. And a lot of them are really, really interested in the idea that you mean to tell me if this happens, that I can get on my bike, leave my house, and have the most incredible 2 or 3 mile ride along the most beautiful river on the planet to go to work every day, and I never have to set foot in a car. So when we think about the ways in which we can think creatively to solve problems, we will have a traffic planner that will be talking in the second meeting about the condition of traffic. We as planners believe the best way to solve the traffic issue is to give people viable options otherwise. So, with young folks, new millennials that work in our studio, they'd rather walk, they'd rather bike if they had a nice place to walk and a nice place to bike. So when we talk about thinking expansively about what might be, let's think about what opening up that riverfront will do to the average citizen who lives in the Bywater and can now ride their bike. So just a thought there, and I know we also had a number of folks from the Bike Easy organization that have already said, we love the idea of biking. Can we do that? So a lot of things that have come in that weren't brought up tonight that have already been suggested that we'd like all of you to think about. Oh, okay. This is a comment from somebody that had to leave, and I'll go ahead and read the comment. Brooke Randolph, 6000 block of Dauphine Street. 4 things. She says, will you be redesigning what is Crescent Park? Number 2, let's have history and education about life on the river. So perhaps touching on a couple of the other comments, this amazing heritage we have. Can we tell the story of our city better and use the riverfront to do that? Number 3, can we move on down through the lower 9th Ward along the river? Educational facilities, schools on the river, artists and craftsmen in residence. We did hear from one of the artists here tonight. Number 4, why not have something that shows how people still make a living on the river and how some of our people can be engaged in making their living on the river? So again, touching on the ideas of this amazing heritage that we can all celebrate. Okay, we got lots more time. Any final, even if you don't have a card, would you like 2 minutes at the microphone? All right. Oh, yes, come on up.
Hi, my name's Stan Rosenthal. I live a block away on Spain Street. So currently at Dauphine and Press, or Plessy now, there is an empty Hano lot that has been serving as an unofficial dog park for this neighborhood, and it is being developed. There's just a meeting about it being developed into affordable housing, which is great. But this illustrates that there's a need for a dog park, and people aren't willing to walk all the way to the far end of Crescent Park. And there's going to be nowhere for these people to go. So it'd be great if, it doesn't have to be a big thing, doesn't have to take up a lot of space, just somewhere for dogs to be off leash further this way towards the Marignan Quarter.
And before you go, can you tell me, since you didn't have a card, can you tell me your name again?
I'm just
You're
filling
in a card. Terrific. Okay, thanks. Any final comments? Yes.
Mark, would you kind of reiterate about the site that the ones who think part of think it's on the ground, but actually most of this is elevated out over the river. There's very little earth.
Yes, we can. So the comment was, can you clarify further that this, when you walk out there and you think you're on terra firma, you're not. You're actually floating over the water. So we'll go back to that cross section. Oh, there we go. So as we look at that, just to orient you, of course, the left side is the French Quarter. It's the land side. The little vertical rectangle is a train, and that's the train tracks. There's a relatively small section of levee, and that is under the jurisdiction, of course, of the levee, the Orleans Levee District, and they have very strict things. Of course, it's keeping the water out and keeping us dry, so they have very clear restrictions in terms of what can and can't be done because they care a great deal about the composition of the levee. The vast majority, as you go out to the river, which would be to your right as you look at it, the shaded in thing is the warehouse itself. Almost all of, well, essentially all of that is elevated on an elevated platform, a pier or wharf structure. And so when you get out there, the Coast Guard, the Port of New Orleans, lots of folks have jurisdiction because it is still a maritime river. You can't do things, you're limited as to what you can do right at the edge, because if a ship kind of goes haywire, they have responsibility for protecting property and life along that edge. But the point is, the vast majority of it is actually elevated above the water. And as we mentioned before, the Vieux-Carré Commission and the State Historic Preservation groups also have a say-so, because these wharves are relatively old, even though you don't consider them historic in the traditional sense. They do have a say-so in what can and can't be done from an architectural standpoint. Come on up.
Yes, my name is Alan Johnson. I live in the Marigny, and I noticed a lot of people weren't commenting, but some I had. I was just sort of curious if people weren't commenting because people had already said what they had to say. So if you wouldn't mind, everyone who is interested in a passive park at these places, could you please stand up and be represented? A passive park, such as it's been discussed. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We do have a couple more cards coming in. Should I say their name? Is that okay? Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So as we said, if you're not comfortable coming up to the microphone, it's perfectly fine. Just write the card and I can read it. Not all people enjoy public speaking. So we have someone from 2017 Charles Avenue in Chalmette. And his comment is, what is the expected annual maintenance expenses for this park? And what are your plans for generating funds to fund the expenses? This is a comment that came up at the previous neighborhood meeting that we attended, and Mr. Foreman had commented on it. The expectation is that there is the need to be able to generate revenue to be able to pay for the operating and maintenance expenses of the park. I would say a lot depends on, I think the comment was, well, what will that cost? The obvious answer is a lot depends on what it is. If all we have is simply an open place, then we have basic maintenance. The big ones, I think, are security. And of course, if there's landscaping and irrigation, there's a need to tend to that. But to be clear, Mr. Foreman had clarified that in the VC Pora Faubourg Marigny meeting last month, that there is the expectation that the hope, the goal, that there will be revenue generated to be able to pay for those maintenance costs, whatever they may be. Second comment from Lainey Dornier, and does Lainey want to speak, or should I read that? Yeah, I guess I should read that. Simply says, great idea. 818 Bartholomew. Great idea. I love the park that has been created. It needs to be bike friendly. Next commenter, Jack Greenwood. Jack, would you like to come on up?
Hey, I just wanted to thank you earlier, Mark, for reminding us about the past meeting and the potential for bike space in this connecting corridor. I have used the Moonwalk and Waldenberg Park more than a few times to get further into the CBD. I think there's fantastic opportunity to make this a connecting section for people who bike, for people who walk, to really link all the neighborhoods together. Echoing what somebody said over here, adding additional small pieces of infrastructure like water fountains, like little bike stations to encourage and permit that activity would be wonderful. In my hometown of Dallas, we recently reclaimed about 2 miles of passive space. It's now a bike trail. They have these bike stations with little pumps, little tools you can use to retune your bike. They've saved my life more than a few times when I go out there, and it really makes a big difference to show that they are keeping bikers in mind, they are keeping people who walk in mind, and just really encourages people to come out there.
Okay, thank you so much, Jack. Got a couple more cards coming in. One more. Oh, yes. Amanda reminded me this entire presentation will be on the website in the morning. So if you'd like to revisit some of the comments made tonight, please do so. Andy Gallagher. Andy?
I'm going to stay right here.
Okay.
I live at 1300 Decatur, so this is my view from my bedroom and my living room. So I have a lot to say about what I'd like to see there. I really like it to be passive. I don't really want to move. So if there's a lot of noise and stuff, I'll probably have to move. So I like to keep it passive. Kind of like it the way it is, but I could see a sidewalk connecting both sides. As far as paying for it, there was a study done originally at the beginning of this process in which it was suggested that revenue from the World Trade Center be used to pay for the entire park. I think that should probably be looked at. And I look forward to a very transparent process. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andy. Okay. If there are any further comments, we're going to talk. I'm sorry. Let's see if we can get to the end. Actually, I'll go back to the schedule. Get to that. Just to remind you again of what happens next. So it's a bit hard to see. It's blown up in a larger scale in the back. The three dots again for the community meeting number 1. This is the meeting 1A. We will replicate this meeting precisely in a couple weeks at Algiers Public Library, and then a third time at the fairgrounds. If you'd like to come just because you're curious to see what some of the Algiers folks or other neighborhoods have to say, you're welcome to come. But to be clear, it'll be an exact replication of this process. We're going to frame the discussion so you can understand what is and isn't available, and then we're going to take comments. So if you're not interested in doing that, what you can look on the website, meeting number 2 will be the next meeting for you, and that'll be a group. We're only doing this 1A, 1B, 1C for this first thing because we really wanted to make sure we got the word out to as many people as possible. So meeting number 2 will be in November on the web, and I don't think we have a date and time fixed yet, but we will, and as soon as we do, it'll be on the website. It'll be in plenty time for you and anybody else that's interested to come and attend. And again, yes, ma'am. Yes. The person who gave her the cards is Amanda Rivera. Amanda, wave your hands. That's Amanda, yes. So meeting number 2, it'll be on the website announcing the meeting, and we'll get the word out as much as we possibly can. In the meantime, again, as we did with VC Pora and Faubourg Marigny, if you're part of a neighborhood association, or you know somebody that's a part of a neighborhood association and you would like the design team and Audubon to come join your neighborhood meeting and share our thoughts, we welcome the opportunity to do that. We accept all invitations. Yes? So in case you didn't hear that, Audubon will have a link on the website to where if you're interested in us coming and joining you at your meeting, we will do so. And as we mentioned, there'll be lots of other things. We are starting a traffic study. We will anticipate having the person that's doing the traffic study at meeting number 2. Meeting number 2 will be much different than this. It'll be much more interactive. We're going to break into groups. We're going to talk about ideas. We're going to drill down on specifics. And hopefully we're going to start building some consensus, which of course is the next critical step. Kelly, any final comments before we break?
My only final comment is, like many of you here tonight, I'm a native New Orleanian. My family's been here many generations. We all recognize that the river is why New Orleans is here, and we're going to do what we can to celebrate that, but keeping in mind, from an historical standpoint, but keeping in mind your comments, your input. So we very much value what you have to say and encourage your further input, and as Mark said, there'll be some workshops going on in some subsequent meetings. So certainly you're encouraged to attend those and participate in those. And again, the website is a robust website that you can provide comments on. So thank you all very much for being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at other meetings. Thank you.